Feuding with Blue Demon Jr., we didn't have to do a lot because I would just go out there and cut a promo and he'd come out and punch me and the place would go crazy. The combination of the two of them definitely kind of laid the foundation for so many guys to get better and go further in their careers. The guys who trained under Hollow were so well polished. ROH was that promotion that everybody wanted to wrestle for. They weren't an entertainment company. They were a wrestling company. He would make you laugh even in the ring. AJ Styles went on to win it, and then eventually Doug Williams won it, and I won it from him. The pure rules were different. The Ring of Honor crowd were all faithful fans who knew Josh Woods and I got booked against each other. It was such a short match. We're two former champions. Danielson's one of those guys who was just so dedicated to wrestling. He was one of my favorite opponents in England. I remember saying after I wrestled him, he's going to be on TV. Seeing these guys stay in show business, but in a different atmosphere is pretty cool. If I want to go back to New Zealand again, if any promoters are interested, bring me over there. We got to clear that up first.
Ladies and gentlemen, hosted by Coach C, Chris Sanders, this is Best for Business.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Another episode of Best for Business. I'm absolutely pumped for this one. A few people requested him. John Walters, man, thank you for joining me for this one.
My pleasure, and thanks for your patience. I know it took a while.
That's all right. And Rich Palladino, Teddy Goods, everybody's over here suggesting you. So, man, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Of course, absolutely.
So one thing I'm curious about when I post this the week before I had Mike Hollow on. So I'm curious, throughout pro wrestling, what are some of the things you've learned from Mike Hollow or Kowalski? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
So when I started my training, Kowalski wasn't as hands-on as he was in the past few years. Obviously, he was aging. His name was still on the school, but Hollow was the guy who really led the drills and led the training. And Walter would gladly show you stuff if you wanted some pointers or some shoot holds. He'd be happy to show you that stuff in the back. And he would get in the ring very randomly. But for the most part, Hollow was the guy who led the drills and led the training. And I mean, Kowalski's obviously, his name speaks for himself, wealth of knowledge, respected Hall of Famer. So anytime he would pull you aside and show you some stuff, you'd listen, and he would definitely show some holds that were more meant to like really hurt people as opposed to kind of working together. So I would say Walter's name and the notoriety of being trained by him was definitely something that carried some weight on the independent scene. But Mike was really the guy who led the training, and you can ask those guys from those early Kowalski days and the early Chaotic days. The guys who trained under Hollow were so well polished with footwork, conditioning. I was wrestling 25, 30-minute matches on a regular basis and not getting tired just because of the drills he put us through. So the combination of the two of them definitely kind of laid the foundation for so many guys to get better and go further in their careers.
So to go with that, I saw your Facebook post that this month will mark 25 years in the business, is it?
Yeah, January 20th is the day I started training at Kowalski of the year 2000. So, yeah, 25 years.
If you could remember, do you remember John Walters' first ever pro wrestling match?
The first ever match, if you want to call it that, excuse me, was a battle royal for Mike Sparta. And I don't remember what the name of his promotion was. It's kind of I'm kind of drawing a blank, but it was a battle royal. The main event was Yokozuna and Brian Lee, and Brian Lee was doing like the fake Undertaker character at the time. Yeah, and it was a battle royal, and I think I just took a couple chops and got thrown over the top. I didn't even have gear at that point. I think I wore like workout pants to the ring because it was one of those things where they needed some people at the last minute, and I got asked to do it. And maybe 3-4 months into my training, but my first singles match was against Jimmy Cash, who was a Kowalski student also. We started around the same time, and I had a couple matches with him. Same promotion, Mike Sparta. And you look back now, and the matches were so bad. But, you're just excited to be out there and wrestle in front of a live crowd, and you almost forget everything because the nerves are so high. And you get more comfortable in the ring, and you realize back then how you didn't really enjoy it as much, even though you can look back and say, oh, man, that was cool. You just were so nervous and insecure your first match. So I think that's a natural feeling.
Where did the name Hurricane come in from?
I don't remember exactly. I think my college roommate kind of recommended it. I think we were watching the Hurricane movie that Denzel Washington was in, the movie based on the boxer. and I think it just kind of said, oh, let's go with that. So that's to my recollection how it probably started, but 25 years ago, it's tough to pinpoint the exact date, room, reasoning behind it.
Yeah, so you mentioned it 25 years. So when I was doing my research, it took me, I think it was close to 2 hours, just going through a lot of your matches and trying to get as many matches or seeing if I can ask you about certain things. But one of the things I'm curious about, tell me about recently wrestling Brad Cashew for Chaotic Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm back up in New England for some time, and I didn't really know whether or not I was going to wrestle while I was up here. I hadn't completely ruled it out. But Chaotic had mentioned to me in the past, if you ever want to come back up here and work some shows, we'd love to have you. And then Rich Palladino, my agent, he's not really my agent, but everyone seems to contact him to see if I'm available for shows, said that there was other promotions, Beyond Wrestling and Limitless Wrestling. So it seemed like there was a little bit of interest. And I said, well, let me give it a go and see how I feel. And before I committed, I wanted to get into the ring and train a little bit, because even though I keep myself in shape in the weight room, cardio wise, ring shape is just a totally different animal. And anybody who wrestles will tell you that. Ring conditioning, if you haven't been in the ring for a long time, it does lose you. So I wanted to get in the ring, and I did, and I felt fine. So yeah, I went back and wrestled Brad Cashew, and he's one of these young up and comers who's been around for a few years and is really, really good and polished. So I said I want to kind of test myself against guys like that. So most of these matches I've had, plus the ones coming up, are against some of these younger guys, and it's just kind of a personal accomplishment to be able to go in there and go with them after 25 years. And I just had a match this past week, New Year's Eve, and I felt like I was 20 again, and it was a 15-minute match. So yeah, these guys are helping me get my ring conditioning back. Not that I'm looking to make a full-time run at this, but have a little fun, make a little money, and keep my name out there. And yeah, but Brad is very good.
Was this your first introduction to Ryan Clancy too on New Year's?
I had heard about him, but just kind of waves. And then I watched some of his matches, and everybody I told that would be wrestling him said, "Oh, you guys are going to be amazing. He's really kind of a throwback wrestler. He's a technical wrestler." And I was blown away by him. I think he's only been in the business for 6 years, and nobody should be that good after only 6 years. He's very, very good. And our match was very old school. A lot of wrist locks, a lot of holds, a lot of submissions. The fans really enjoyed it, and you don't see that as much in wrestling anymore. I think a lot of that approach is gone, especially with how fast moving wrestling is today. So I think if done right, pure wrestling, technical wrestling is still in demand and still could definitely be appreciated. It just has to be reintroduced kind of slowly.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about one of the companies I seen you did a lot for was Big Time Wrestling. But one match that stood out to me was having Ric Flair as your referee on March 27, 2009 against Jay Lethal. Tell me some of the things. Did you learn from Ric Flair that match?
Flair, I wouldn't say that I learned too much. I mean, he was obviously, he gave criticism and feedback after the match, which is always beneficial, especially a guy like Ric Flair. Anytime he's going to tell you something, you listen. But he was the referee for me and Lethal, and then he was also a referee for Just Incredible and I on the same week. But that match, he didn't really ref. He kind of just did a run-in. We did an angle at the beginning where I punched him, and then he came back in and counted the 3 count. I think for me, it was more just like, holy cow, Ric Flair and I are working together. It's kind of neat. And no matter how experienced you get in wrestling, anytime you're in the ring with somebody that you grew up watching, it's kind of nostalgic and cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say he did give some feedback, but I'd say more just the excitement of doing that in front of that many fans. And Big Time Wrestling was very, very good to me. I wrestled Kevin Nash, Tatanka, Matt Hardy, Just Incredible. I did the angle with Ric Flair, Too Cold Scorpio. So they always put me in there with guys who I could learn from. And you're gonna learn in every match, but guys that have been on TV and legends of this sport, you're gonna learn a lot more from them.
Do you have a match at Big Time that sticks out to you?
That match with Just Incredible and Webster, where Ric Flair was the ref, it was definitely one of them, because we had the feud was building for so many months. We had these matches and run-ins, and finally, when the big match, the big title match took place, the place was packed and it had meaning. And obviously, Ric Flair being there and counting the 3 count was really cool. So that I would say that one. But when I wrestled Tatanka, that was really cool too. Matt Hardy. It's hard to pick the one, but I would say the one with Just Incredible, just because of the storyline behind it. The other matches that I wrestled with some of these stars were really cool, but I would say that one had more meaning just because there was so much work behind it.
So some of my favorite matches of yours I was looking up were all part of Ring of Honor. So for you, how did Ring of Honor start? How did the opportunity come to be?
Well, back in the early 2000s, ROH was that promotion that everybody wanted to wrestle for because, I mean, the internet kind of, it's a word I'm looking for, just the internet exposure. And it was the premier promotion. And it was an independent promotion still. It was not on television. It was more tape trading. And I think because they were embracing more of like the old school style, whether it was technical, high flying, strong style, they weren't an entertainment company. They were a wrestling company. So somebody like me who kind of grew up appreciating the art of pure wrestling and wanted to wrestle there. I remember sending some tapes and never really hearing back. And then I met Gary Michael Capetta, a ring announcer from WCW, at an independent show in New England. And he was impressed with my work, and we kept in contact, and we're still friends to this day. And he reached out to the promoters because he worked for them at the time. Maybe he wasn't working with them yet, doing backstage announcing and interviews, but he was friendly with them. He'd go to the shows and he'd help out. So I think he basically contacted me, and then I remember maybe a week or two later, I got a call that they wanted to have me do a show in Philly.
So we talk about Ring of Honor. One of the things that stuck out to me was you being a part of the embassy. What are some of the things that you think you learned from people in that group, or even just in general, being around those guys?
Well, I think the embassy was, I wouldn't say it was my first time being a heel because I had been a heel in Chaotic Wrestling and some other promotions, but just kind of letting my character go. Obviously, Prince Nana is just, he's just a character, and he's funny and he's charismatic and believable in who he is, because I think that's really who he is. He is kind of just like this, like, I'm not going to say he's sleazy because he's my friend. I get along with him, but I don't think it's a huge extension of himself to be this kind of goofy guy trying to sell stuff. Mm-hmm. So being in that group was cool because, well, number one, he would make you laugh even in the ring. I mean, he was always, some of his facial expressions, his mannerisms, his sayings would make me have to put my face in the mat and laugh a couple times. But I would say it was just a kind of a different approach to me. I had been this pure wrestler that was kind of like this straight-laced baby face who didn't really talk shit. And then all of a sudden I'm with Nana, who I did the opposite. So I think we could have gotten more out of it. But right after I lost that pure title to Jay Lethal, I took some time off from wrestling. And then when I came back, the embassy had kind of grown into something else. So it was short-lived, but enjoyable.
Do you have any like specific moments or like moments that stand out in pro wrestling when you wrestled Generation Next? Because I know for a few times you wrestled them.
Yeah, we did there was an 8-man tag in, I believe it was in Baltimore, where we wrestled almost an hour. It was Generation Next, who was Jack Evans, Alex Shelley, Austin Aries, Roderick Strong, against me, Jimmy Rave, and the Briscoe brothers. And we did like 55 minutes. It was an outdoor show under a tent in the middle of the summer. And I remember how hot it was. But I just remember the 8 of us who were all young and hungry just going out there and putting on this great match. And people still talk about it today. I actually had a fan in Philly a couple of years ago when I did a Ring of Honor pay-per-view still say, oh, it's still one of my favorite matches. And the saddest part about that match is I look back and 2 of my partners from that team are gone. And we're not talking about guys from the 90s. We're talking about people my age or a little younger, a little older. Jimmy Rave and Jay Briscoe have both passed away. So that's humbling at the same time when you look back at some of these matches you had and you say, oh my God, two of the people you team with aren't even alive anymore.
Yes.
Not only makes you appreciate wrestling and the time we have, but also life.
Yeah. So to go with that, on Leo's show, you talked about moments with the Briscoes. Do you have any specific stories or memories with Jimmy Rave?
Not really. I mean, I wrestled him a couple times. I teamed with him. Great guy. It's just tragic what happened to him. You talk about a guy who was just this clean-cut, handsome kid, great wrestler, and then he just kind of went down this dark path. And I don't know the specifics. I know he got into some substances and ultimately had a bunch of amputations. Then he ended up dying. Man, it's it's tough because everybody gets into this business because they love it. They want to entertain. They want to make money for selfish reasons, whether it's just you want to be famous or whatever it is. Everyone has their reason, but I think everybody is bonded by it. And I definitely have a bond with him because he was good to me. I had great matches with him, and we were kind of in the same points in our career in Ring of Honor. And always great memories. And then to see how he kind of, tailspinned out of control and ended up passing away, it's just really sad.
So to go with that, you talked about the Pure Championship. So on August 28, 2004, you defeat Doug Williams and become the Pure Champion. Now, you talked about earlier the Pure Rules matches and how you like that style. So what was it about the Pure matches that you love so much?
It was different. And because you only had certain amount of rope breaks, you could get creative with submission holds inside the ropes. Believe the 10 count on the floor was now a 20 count. Closed fists, you get a warning after one, and then you get a point taken away, I believe. But I think it was just something that was different, and it was suited for guys who were pure wrestlers. And the pure division was fantastic. I remember the tournament to crown the pure championship started off in Boston, and I wrestled CM Punk in the opening round, and I believe AJ Styles went on to win it, and then eventually Doug Williams won it, and I won it from him. And I mean, Doug Williams is one of the best pure wrestlers out there. So to wrestle him in Boston and to win the title in Boston, my hometown, that was pretty cool. But I think overall the pure rules were different. I think if it was on television, it would have been easier to kind of explain to the crowd. But the Ring of Honor crowd were all faithful fans who knew what it was.
Yeah.
But if a first-time person's going to a show and watching, they may not have understood what it was. So I do like that the referee would say the rules beforehand for any newcomers. But I had a good time with it. It was a good title run and interesting matches, and it makes you think outside the box when you're putting these matches together. It's like, well, how am I going to do this? And what's going to happen if I run out of rope breaks? And I think most of the people involved in it did enjoy it.
So to go with that, in August of 2023, you got to wrestle Josh Woods. Tell me about that experience, because he's big into pure wrestling before too.
Yeah, Josh Woods and I wrestled for Ring of Honor television. It was a very short match. And when you go to the AEW tapings, and I've been there a few times, I was a judge for some pure title matches, and I've done some Ring of Honor television matches. They're cramming so many matches into a 1 hour or 2 hour show that these matches are very, very short.
Right.
And I remember when Josh Woods and I got booked against each other, it was such a short match, and he was kind of upset because he said, we're two former champions, we could go out there and have a really, really good match. And it was more kind of just a match about just to kind of get him more established, which was fine. I'm not looking to make a run at wrestling or get my name out there. I'm happy to do whatever it takes at this point. But I think that if they had given us more time, they said, hey, let's go have a 10, 15 minute pure wrestling match, we definitely could have done had an amazing match. But that's not what they had in mind that day, whether it was time restraints, whether it was they wanted to really get behind Josh Woods. I know they were giving him a big push, but a great wrestler, good guy. And he's really good. I don't really watch Ring of Honor now, so I don't know what they're doing with him, but he's definitely a guy that I think could be a big star.
So something else you mentioned, I've always been curious for. You were also a judge for a Pure Rules match with Josh Woods and Ace Steel. I believe it was Garcia and Yuta. So as a Pure, yes. What do you do? Just get a front row seat for that, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you're keeping track and you're judging, but I don't know if any of the matches have ever gone to the judges. Maybe you'd know, but I don't know if they've ever had the judges decide a winner.
Yeah,
I think
not
most
recently,
of the time,
I don't believe.
Yeah, somebody told me, it might have been Ace Steel, said that they have had the judges decide the matches before, but I don't know. But yeah, you're basically a judge, and whether you're really a judge or not, you have a front row seat to a really good match. And that Yuta Garcia match was excellent in Boston, Lowell. So I think it's cool. You bring back some old pure champions to be a judge. I think that's kind of neat, but there was no pressure on my end.
So to go with that too, on Leo Connors, you mentioned one person, Bryan Danielson, and the transformation you've seen. But do you remember your first interaction with him?
I think it was probably for ECWA, Jim Kettner's promotion down in Delaware. I wrestled him there, but I don't know if that was the first time I had met him. I probably had met him at another show. But I do remember wrestling him in Delaware, and then we traveled up to Boston for WWE television, and him and I tagged together against Paul London and Brian Kendrick for Velocity. And then I remember him driving back to my house, and then I think we went out to Albany. There was a few days where I was with him, and then, of course, over the years, I've been on shows with him. I saw him recently, maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago when I was at AEW in Georgia. It was the first time I've seen him in like 20 years. But Danielson's one of those guys who was just so dedicated to wrestling. I tell people all the time, Danielson, I don't think he ever had a job outside of wrestling. I think that's all he's ever done. I think from conversations with him, and I could be wrong, I don't think he's ever done anything. I think maybe he worked at a fast food restaurant when he was younger, but he's dedicated his life to wrestling, and it's paid off. I mean, he would fly himself to England and wrestle for months at a time in Japan, and then another guy who just his pure wrestling kind of won the fans over. He's not a big guy, but everything he did was believable, and you don't hear anybody say anything negative about him. Just a good human being. So seeing him get that notoriety and that respect is definitely well founded. I'm happy for him. But good guy, yeah. But we were only wrestled, I think, one singles match and then maybe a 4-way. So didn't wrestle him as much as I would have liked to, but I'm very happy for him.
When you talk about everyone in your career, do you feel that there's people, obviously you mentioned Mike Hollow, but opponents or people you really learn from?
Yeah, well, especially in the early days, because in the early days it's a learning process. Even now, I'm still learning, and veterans can learn from the young guys too. I don't want to be one of these bitter veterans that doesn't want to wrestle with younger guys or give back or give feedback. I don't like that. I think a lot of people do their time and then they leave and they don't give back to the business that was good to them, and I'm not a big fan of that. But I would definitely say the early days, the chaotic days with Slick Wagner Brown and Luis Ortiz and Vince Vicalo. These are these guys I trained with and in Kowalski's class, and then did shows with and drove with and traveled with. Those guys you learn the most from, because when you're young, that's when you're a sponge. That's when you're absorbing the most stuff. And then as I got more established, working at Ring of Honor, working some of these WWE dark matches, even though they were squash matches, you're still learning from these guys because they'll pull you aside and tell you what you need to know. And then also the big time wrestling matches when you're wrestling guys who have been on TV, Matt Hardy, Tatanka, and you can have 15, 20-minute matches with them. That's where you really learn. Going to WWE TV and doing a dark match, that's fun and all. Wrestling Bob Holly, wrestling a Big Show, doing that stuff is cool. But you're not really learning much. You're there just kind of as a glorified punching bag. When you can wrestle these guys on the independent level in front of fans that almost see you as a 50-50 match, right? On dark matches, it was never 50-50. Nobody thought I was going to beat Bob Holly. Yeah. But when you're wrestling Matt Hardy in front of 1,500 people and it's a competitive match, or Tatanka or Kevin Nash, that's when you're learning the most, because you're able to go in there and do your stuff as opposed to just bumping. So everybody you wrestle, you learn from.
Yeah. So another opponent you mentioned him on Leo's show, Joel Redman or an NXT Oliver Gray. Do you have like a moment that stands out wrestling him?
Yeah, he was one of my favorite opponents in England. I wrestled him a couple times. We did a match for Premier Promotions in England, which is a company that does strictly round matches, like the old school rounds in British style wrestling, where I think it's like 8 5-minute rounds, a little break in between, a drink of water. And him and I wrestled a match where I think it was probably my longest singles match, where we probably wrestled 45, 50 minutes. And I just remember how tired I was, but that guy was an absolute machine. People always talk to me about my cardio and your gas tank is endless. I mean, he gave me a run for my money. Excellent wrestler. I don't know what he's doing anymore, if he is wrestling much anymore, but I may go back over to England next summer for a vacation, maybe do some shows or some seminars. But yeah, he was, I don't think his WWE run lasted very long. No. You probably know better than I did.
Yeah, he was the first NXT tag champ.
Yeah, excellent wrestler, good guy. And that's all. I had a couple matches with him over there, but very well-spoken, quiet, respectful. But once you got him in the ring, I mean, that guy could go.
So another person I want to ask you about was wrestling. And I don't know if they were his early days, but Ludwig Kaiser in WWE.
Yeah. So when I wrestled him in Germany, he went by Axel Dieter Jr. I guess his father was a wrestler, pretty popular over in Germany. And I had gone over to Germany for WXW, I think maybe three or four times. Anytime I was in England, they would book me and, fly me over to Germany to do a match or two. And I wrestled him somewhere. It was a small little countryside town in Germany, a few hundred people. But excellent match, excellent guy. And I remember him sending me a Facebook message afterwards, thanking me for the match and offering me to take me out next time I was in town. Really good guy. I haven't seen much of his stuff because I don't watch much wrestling on TV anymore, but I think he's more kind of like a sidekick, right? But they do let him wrestle as well. And good guy, always took care of himself, great physique, well-spoken. And I remember saying after I wrestled him, I said, he's going to be on TV because his English was very good. His German was good. He was good looking. It looked like he had a good head on his shoulders. And I think when I wrestled him, he was still fairly new, maybe a couple years into the business. But man, anytime you see good guys get to the highest level, that's nice. It's good to see.
Did you ever wrestle anyone else that you knew instantly that they were going to be a star or big someday in wrestling?
Probably, yeah. I mean, Ryan Clancy this past week for Beyond Wrestling. Right. I mean, just how fluid and smooth he is in the ring, and another guy who is just you can tell he's good natured. He's doesn't have an ego, and that's what the business needs is people who don't take themselves so seriously. will work for the match and not for themselves. And the way he's wrestling, I think he can have a very long career because he's not doing these crazy, insane spots. He's just kind of bringing back some pure wrestling. And I know Beyond Wrestling wanted me for that match. I mean, they've used me before, but they said, we want you to wrestle Ryan Clancy. That was kind of the match they wanted. Not saying they didn't want me, but they wanted me versus him.
Wow.
And I was very impressed by him. And so he's definitely one of them. But I'm trying to look back at the past and other people that I've wrestled who might have made it. There probably are some people I'm just not remembering.
What about wrestling Jay White?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jay White, when I wrestled him over in New Zealand, I think at the time he was wrestling for New Japan, but I don't think he was a big star yet. I think he was kind of like at that young boy status. Mm-hmm. And another guy. Yeah. Another guy. I keep repeating myself. Polite, respectful, nice. I saw him at AEW. I think it was the show I wrestled Josh Woods, I think out in Kentucky. And I saw him for the first time. He was in the weight room, and I went down there to hit the exercise bike, and we started talking, and he remembered me. And when I went over to New Zealand, it was kind of one of these. I was the American coming over to kind of challenge anybody in the country. And I was doing the RJ Brewer gimmick at the time. So, I was getting a lot of hate all over the world for being the anti-immigrant guy. But when I went over there, treated very well in New Zealand, and Jay White and I had a good match. And no surprise that he's gotten as far as he has.
What about when you wrestled Claudio? Like, what level of wrestling was he at the time? Was he newer at the time?
Yeah. Claudio?
Yeah.
I think we were probably around the same level.
Okay.
I think I wrestled him in Connecticut, and there was maybe 20 fans there. In fact, him and I talked about that last time I saw him. Claudio's great. I mean, not only is he believable because of how big he is, just a naturally strong person, tall. Another guy fluent in many languages and a good guy. I said it before in other interviews. Seeing guys who are like pricks and assholes make it in the business, it's fine. It is what it is. It's the way life is. But when you see good people make it, it's kind of more rewarding. Seeing people who didn't step on anybody's toes to get to where they are. And Claudio's one of those guys. I don't know what happened with WWE, whether he asked to get released or whether he got let go. But I mean, that's a guy you'd want on your roster forever, I would think.
Yeah. So when I was going through your resume, your matches kept going and going and going. So there's two people I want to ask you about. The first one is Zack Sabre Jr. Now, I think there was a period where you wrestled him back to back certain days, right?
Probably, yeah, in England. I would say Zack Sabre Jr. is probably one of the best technical wrestlers out there by far. I'd say he's in the top 3 or 4. Just the moves he knows and how fluid he puts them on and how much he can do without even planning it. It's kind of scary. And another good guy, great guy. I wrestled him in England probably 3 or 4 times, and I think one of our matches was for that premier promotion that I had mentioned that did the rounds matches. Zack's awesome. I don't know his status now. I know AEW was using him for some matches, and I saw some clips of him wrestling with Danielson, but I don't think he's there regularly.
No, he's New Japan.
New Japan, yeah. I saw him at one of the shows I think that same show when I wrestled Josh Woods, there was a bunch of people backstage. I saw him there and I caught up with him. But yeah, it's he definitely has his style, and you go in there and you wrestle him. That's the style you're wrestling.
And the last guy I want to ask you about is wrestling Nigel McGuinness.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic! One of my favorite human beings out there.
Nice.
And I see that he just wrestled again in the pure match at the pay-per-view. Yeah, Nigel and I had some wars and some battles, and just a fun, charismatic guy. He does magic backstage. He's always telling jokes, and I know he took a break from wrestling. He had some injuries, and I know that he did that documentary, which the documentary, when that come out, like 15 years ago, and I think I just watched it like a couple months ago because I found it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because he had asked me if I've seen it, I had seen it, and I said no, and he said, "Well, I'll send you a copy." Never did, but I found it on YouTube, and I messaged him maybe a month ago and told him I just watched it, and he was appreciative, and he invited me to his magic show in LA when I was living out in Palm Springs, but I had a conflict and I couldn't make it. But one of these days, if he's still performing these shows, I want to see it because I know he does kind of magic and illusion, and Chad Collier, I don't know if you know who he is. He was a Ring of Honor guy, another kind of pure wrestler back in the day. He does magic also. He's an illusionist and a mentalist. So seeing these guys stay in show business, but in a different atmosphere is pretty cool. But yeah, Nigel's awesome.
Yeah, so you mentioned you've wrestled in Japan, you wrestled in Germany, you wrestled in a lot of different countries. What do you think from, like, especially Japan and Germany, are things that stand out wrestling there compared to here?
Well, Japan, they look at it more as an art and a sport than entertainment. Not saying they're not entertained by it, but I remember my first match in Japan seeing a bunch of middle-aged men in suits in the front row watching, or there were children, but not as many children. And I remember the crowds were so much more quiet but respectful, but they would clap for submission hold. If you grabbed the ropes during a submission, they would clap. It was more, they appreciated it. They were studying it. I think the attention span there is better than here. I think a lot of the fast-paced wrestling here has gotten a lot of people desensitized to actually waiting for a story and kind of letting a story unfold in the ring. So that's the main difference in Japan. Although I know when WWE goes over there, they want to see WWE style stuff.
Yeah.
But on the independents and some of these New Japan styles, it's more about the sport and the art. And Germany is kind of a mix. Okay. I've only wrestled for one promotion in Germany. That was WXW. And they remind me a lot of the Beyond Wrestling fans. They're smart fans, but they're respectful smart fans. You got some fans that just want to make the show about themselves. They want to chant stuff, and they don't even care. They want to make sure that their voice is heard. Where the German fans to me were respectful. If they saw you were working hard, they were appreciative, but they did want a little bit more entertainment than the Japanese fans, I'd say. And of course, this is not a one size fits all. You're going to go to some crowds that are going to be different. And I tell some of these young kids now is what works for one crowd may not work for the next. You just got to kind of go out there and work and see what you're good at.
So when we look back at your career, what are some chaotic wrestling memories that really stick out to you?
Definitely my feud with Luis Ortiz, for sure. I mean, he was one of those guys that we got paired together and we meshed really well. Amazing chemistry. We had street fights. We had a shoots and ladders match. We had time limit draws, and we became really good friends. I would say during that, but maybe more so after. And I remember saying it on Leo's show. Ortiz and I were never really friends when I started training. I didn't dislike him. I don't think he disliked me. It was more kind of we were just respected each other. But then as we wrestled, we got to know each other outside of wrestling. We became really good friends. And sometimes when you really like somebody, it's easier to put matches on for them. And as crazy as it sounds, the people you like are the ones you're going to hit the most. Yeah. Because you know that you know each other. You understand that that's what they want. Not that you're going to be light and unrealistic with other guys, but you'll ask anybody if you're with somebody in there that you gel with and you click with, that's it's going to make for a better match. So I would definitely say that. And Dr. Tom Pritchard from WWE coming in and refereeing our match one time was really cool. But I mean, I wrestled Aaron Stevens, Damian Sandow, and Vince Vicalo, and just a host of Tommaso, a host of other guys that have come up through Chaotic. And I would say the Ortiz feud was definitely my favorite, but overall, the whole Chaotic experience, because I was a young kid and they really kind of entrusted me to be kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like the figurehead of the company for so long. That's that's flattering. So I would say that was definitely the company that kind of put me on the map.
And talking about memories, do you have a match or a moment that sticks out from your time in Lucha Libre USA?
Uh, One match in specifically, probably not, but feuding with Blue Demon Jr., who Blue Demon Jr. was on Dancing with the Stars in Mexico and soap operas, and obviously the Blue Demon name is so popular and symbolic with Lucha Libre. So for me to be able to go in there and wrestle him as this mega heel, I just remember we didn't have to do a lot because I would just go out there and cut a promo and he'd come out and punch me and the place would go crazy. So whenever you have this huge baby face and then this huge villain, it makes your job so much easier because you don't have to go out there and try to win the crowd over. They already know who you are. They already know who he is. And I remember one time we were somewhere, maybe in Phoenix or somewhere, and I remember they had a little on the big screen before our match. They just showed me start talking. They were already booing me. And I said, man, this is going to be an easy night. And because I was on Dateline and I was on the front page of the LA Times, I got a lot of major press for that character. They knew me. And even though they know it's a show, immigration is very serious to some people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very personal, topical topic. So when I'm out there saying that these people need to get unmasked and sent home, even people who know that pro wrestling is a show, they're taking offense to that. So it was kind of scary. We definitely blurred the lines between reality and fiction, but I enjoyed it. I told people all the time I would cut these promos in character saying that these were my true feelings. And I was like, oh, I can't believe you did that. I was like, well, why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah.
If I want them to believe me, why would I go out there and say it's just a character? Yeah. So, and I'm not saying that I'm some anti-immigrant racist, but to say that we have an immigration problem is not super far-fetched, right? I just took that opinion and I turned the volume to 1,000,000 and just ran with it. And it was fun. It was a fun few years.
So when we go through your career, in your eyes, in these 25 years, how do you think pro wrestling has evolved?
It's gotten faster. Mm-hmm. What I said to somebody recently is that the athleticism, the moves are more creative than ever. I think it's gotten a little too fast for my liking. Now, of course, again, I'm not going to be one of these veterans that say, oh my God, everything was better back in the days. It wasn't, because you look at some of the real old school stuff, like the stuff my grandfather and father watched, like the Bruno Sammartino stuff. I didn't like that style of wrestling, just a bunch of punches and kicks. Like I'm not shitting on those guys. They're legends and deserve respect. But back then it was like they're behind the person, and whatever they're doing, they're going to be applauded or booed. But I wasn't entertained by that. Mm-hmm. Two guys just punching and kicking each other. I was never entertained by that. My favorite style of wrestling was probably the 2003, 2004 era of WWE, where guys like Guerrero, Angle, Benoit, RVD, they were letting those guys go and have these great matches. And you had, like, obviously The Rock and Austin, the larger-than-life people on the top of the card. It was a nice blend of entertainment plus sport. And to me now, it's the same. It's just, I think the storytelling is not as good as it was. But I'm also saying, from what I've heard, I haven't really been watching it, so I could just be spewing a bunch of BS now. But it's definitely gotten faster. It's gotten a lot more mainstream. There's more ways to watch it now. But I also think because there's so much more streaming services and B-roll and YouTube, there isn't as much of a rush to watch it live. And when you're watching it after it's already aired and you already know what happened, I just don't think that excitement's there.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, there was 4 pay-per-views a year, and you'd get a Saturday night's main event here and there. And I remember one time sleeping through Saturday night's main event, waking up on Sunday morning so depressed that I missed it. And back then there was no YouTube to rewatch it. So you had to watch like WWF Superstars the next week to see what happened. Back then you really had to wait and be patient and pay to see the stars on pay-per-view. Now I think they're everywhere. Every guy on a roster, you see them every week. And for better or for worse, I just think that luster is not there anymore. But I'm also older now. I'm not a kid. So kids that are young now might be saying the same thing 20 years from now. Things change, things evolve, and you have to go with it. But again, my matches are kind of the same as they were 20 years ago, and I think they're still appreciated. So just because the style changes doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah. So I heard you say this on Leo's show, and I'm just dying to hear it from your perspective again. Can you tell me that New Zealand apple story?
Yeah. So We went to New Zealand, and I remember on my flight, John Anderson, strongman from New Japan, who wrestled for Lucha Libre USA. He was kind of my bodyguard, big bodybuilder, power lifter. He was on the same flight as me, and I just remember New Zealand it's an island, very strict with their agriculture and pesticides and bringing foreign foods in there. And I had an apple in my bag, and I just was asleep while we were landing. I was sleeping. They were giving a speech about if you have any food, you got to throw it out before you get here, or eat it before you land. And I just remember I didn't hear it. So I went through customs, and I got pulled to the side, a little side room. And the gentleman said, this is a serious offense. We're going to fine you $500. And I remember saying, like, for an apple, and he flipped out. He's like, it's not for an apple, it's for the pest. And he like buried me. So, he said it was like a $500 or $700 fine. I said, well, I don't have that kind of cash on me. He said, well, we can take a credit card. I had a credit card, but I said, I'm not going to pay this now. I got to look into this. I didn't know if it was some kind of BS. And then they ended up taking down my information, and I asked the promoters who brought me in, and they said, yeah, that's serious. If you come back here, they'll throw you in jail and deport you if you don't pay that. So I'm probably not going to New Zealand anytime soon. But John Anderson had a bunch of food, and this is this bodybuilder who eats every 25 minutes, and he had to throw his food out. And I remember how depressed he was. So that's that. I remember him on the flight because of that reason. And yeah, I mean, nothing amounted to it. I'm in a different country. They're not gonna. I don't think they're gonna send agents over here to arrest me over that. But yeah, if I want to go back to New Zealand again, if any promoters are interested, bring me over there. We got to clear that up first.
So I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. However, I've ended every interview the same. Obviously, I hope it's not anytime soon. The day John Walters decides it's time to hang up the boots, what do you want your legacy in pro wrestling to be?
Well, on a wrestling standpoint, just somebody that kind of gave the fans his all when he was in there. Believability. Yeah, I'd say that was always my goal, is to be believable. When I started at Kowalski's, I was not the biggest guy. I wasn't the best talker, but I said, I'm going to be the hardest worker and I'm going to be the most believable. So I tried to be the most intense and the most technical I could, because those were the hands that I was dealt. So I'd say definitely that. But on a personal level, definitely somebody that helped out and gave back. Nice. And like I said, Gary Capetto is one of my good friends, and he would help out the Chaotic guys in the early days. We would drive down. He would let us spend the night at his house. He'd cook for us, whether we were going to Ring of Honor or Delaware. And he always said, what I want from you is when you're in a position to give back to the next generation, to do so. And I took that personally, because we don't have to, but to be one of these guys that's been doing it for so long and then just bitch about the new generation without even trying to help them, that's selfish. Yeah. So definitely somebody that's giving back, and selfishly, I'm having fun now too. So even though I'm giving back and helping these guys out, they're helping me too. So it's a win-win. It's a business in the end. It's all about making money, but in the end, I also think people need to be more giving, and that's hopefully how I'll be remembered. And there will be a day I stop wrestling, and I didn't even think I'd be wrestling this trip up north, but I'm here, and I always say I'm not going to ever retire. I'm just going to stop taking bookings when the time is right, and that'll be the end of it. But I think I'll always still get involved, and especially if I have friends up here who have wrestling schools, and I know some guys, I'll still go check out the shows and help out when I can. But there'll be a day physically I won't be able to, but hopefully that doesn't come soon.
Yeah. Well, John Walters, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join me for this one.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me, and thanks again for being patient with me. I had a long week.
Thank you, man, for doing this, and thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. This was Best for Business.